The church bells rang like silver promises, their echoes spilling over the garden filled with white roses. Guests whispered with excitement, fanning themselves beneath the soft glow of the afternoon sun. Everything was perfect, the kind of perfection that money, love, and destiny were supposed to buy. Evelyn Hart stood before the mirror in the bridal suite, a vision in ivory silk. Her veil shimmered as sunlight touched the lace, the reflection of a woman who had waited her whole life for this moment. Her hands trembled, not from fear, but from joy. In a few minutes, she would walk down the aisle to the man she loved more than anything. Adrian Sinclair, heir to the Sinclair Group, the man who promised her forever. Her best friend and maid of honor, Eva Hart, adjusted her train with a too-sweet smile. "You look beautiful, Evie," she murmured. "Thank you," Evelyn said softly, her voice warm. "For everything. I couldn't have done this without you." Lila's eyes flickered, just for a moment. Something sharp, something jealous, before her lips curved again. "Of course not," she said. "You deserve the world." Outside, the orchestra began to play. The doors opened, revealing a carpet of white petals leading to the altar where Adrian was supposed to be waiting. Only, he wasn't there. A murmur spread through the church. The guests turned, whispering. The music faltered. Evelyn's smile froze as her gaze swept the aisle. Empty, silent. Her father shifted in his seat, embarrassment flickering over his stern face. The officiant glanced around nervously. The best man stood alone, avoiding her eyes. Minutes passed. Then 10. Then 20. The whispers grew sharper, crueler. Did he change his mind? Maybe he ran away. Evelyn's chest tightened. She stepped back, her bouquet trembling in her hands. "Where is he?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. "He wouldn't, he promised." Then the church doors burst open. A young assistant from the Sinclair estate stumbled in, panting, face pale. "There's been a change," he stammered. "Mr. Sinclair. He's just been married." The world seemed to tilt. Evelyn blinked. "What did you say?" "Mr. Sinclair married Miss Eva Hart. Just now. At City Hall." For a heartbeat, silence fell so complete it seemed the air itself forgot how to breathe. Then a sound escaped Evelyn's lips. Soft, broken, the sound of something shattering inside her chest. Lila stepped forward, veil slipping from her head, eyes glistening, not with guilt, but triumph barely hidden behind a mask of regret. "I'm sorry, Evie," she whispered. "It just happened." Evelyn stared at her sister, at the familiar face that had once shared her childhood secrets and midnight laughter. It didn't make sense. None of it did. Her throat burned as she tore off her veil and stumbled down the aisle, ignoring the gasps, the pity, the flashing cameras. Outside, the rain began to fall. Soft at first, then relentless. Evelyn climbed into her car, the wedding dress heavy with rain and heartbreak. Her makeup streaked down her cheeks like melted dreams. She drove, faster and faster, her mind a blur of betrayal and disbelief. Why? That was the only thought she could form. Why would he do this? Why would she? Thunder cracked across the sky as she rounded the mountain road. Her tears blurred the headlights. The tires skidded on the slick pavement. And in a single flash of lightning, her car broke through the guardrail and plunged into the darkness below. The sound of twisting metal. A splash. Then, silence. The world moved on. By morning, they would say Evelyn Hart was dead. But fate had other plans. The river below the cliff ran fast that night, swollen with rain and secrets. By morning, rescuers found only shattered glass, a twisted car door, and a white veil tangled among the reeds. No body. No trace of the bride who had once promised forever. The world mourns. News traveled faster than mercy. Heiress Evelyn Hart presumed dead after tragic accident on wedding day. Her photograph, smiling, radiant in lace, filled every screen, every magazine. The Hart estate held a funeral without a coffin. Rows of white lilies surrounded an empty casket as cameras flashed and strangers cried. Lila wore black silk and a diamond ring, her hand resting delicately on Adrian Sinclair's arm. To the world, she was the grieving sister and devoted wife. Only in the reflection of the church's marble floor did her smile flicker into something colder. Adrian stood beside her, pale and hollow-eyed. Whatever celebration had been forced upon him felt more like a curse. Reporters whispered that guilt suited him better than love. When the ceremony ended, Evelyn Hart was declared dead. And for everyone else, the story ended there. The girl who didn't die. Far from the city, in a quiet private hospital on the outskirts of Marlow Bay, a woman lay motionless beneath sterile lights. Her body was wrapped in bandages. Tubes and monitors hummed softly around her. The nurses called her the Jane Doe with the wedding ring. Days passed. Then, one night, as the rain tapped against the window, her fingers twitched. Her eyes opened, slowly, painfully, meeting the blurred glow of the machines. A man sat at her bedside, his suit crumpled, exhaustion written into every line of his face. Marcus Reed, her father's former business consultant, had been the only one who refused to believe she was gone. When her gaze met his, relief broke through his exhaustion. "Evelyn," he breathed. "You're alive." She tried to speak, but her throat offered only a whisper. "Why am I here?" "You crashed near the river. They said no one could have survived," he said quietly. "I found you. You've been unconscious for weeks." Memory came back in shards, the altar, the whispers, the announcement, Lila's voice saying it just happened. Evelyn's breath caught. Pain, different from the wounds beneath the bandages, seared through her chest. "Everyone thinks you're dead," Marcus continued. "Maybe that's not such a bad thing." Her eyes shifted toward the rain-streaked window. For the first time, the world beyond it felt empty, detached from who she used to be. Dead. Maybe that was easier. Maybe that was freedom. Marcus leaned closer. "If you stay, the press will tear you apart. Your father will use your name to save his deals. And they—" He hesitated. "They've already moved on." "Adrian," she whispered, tasting the name like poison. Marcus didn't answer. Silence filled the room until the monitor's rhythmic beeps became the only proof she still existed. Finally, Evelyn turned her face toward him, her voice fragile but certain. "Help me disappear." The funeral of a name. A week later, under the quiet cover of midnight, the hospital bed was empty. The nurses found a single note on the table. "Thank you for your kindness. Please forget I was ever here." By dawn, an unmarked ambulance rolled toward the coast. Marcus stood beside it as it left, the driver's silhouette barely visible through the fog. He slipped a simple ring into his pocket, the ring that had been meant for another man, and whispered to the departing lights, "Goodbye, Evelyn Hart." Somewhere inside that van, the woman who had once been Evelyn opened her eyes again. Her reflection in the window showed bandaged skin and eyes no longer soft with innocence but sharp with resolve. "Evelyn Hart is dead," she murmured. A pause. Then, quietly, almost like a vow, "My name is Eva Laurent." And as the first light of dawn spilled over the ocean, the bride who had died was reborn. The sea air was sharp with salt and renewal. 3 months had passed since the world buried Evelyn Hart, and in that time, the woman herself had begun to fade. Her memories, her voice, even the way she used to smile, all of it felt like fragments of someone else's life. The waves crashed outside the window of the seaside villa where she hid. Marcus Reed stood beside her, tablet in hand, dressed in quiet elegance. He had been her savior, her anchor, and now, her only witness. "You've healed as much as the doctors dared hope," he said, scanning the report. "But the scars are reminders," she interrupted softly, touching her cheek where faint traces of injury remained beneath the makeup. "They'll stay. So will I." He hesitated. "You don't have to do this. We could go abroad, start again quietly. A small life. Peace." Evelyn turned from the sea. When she looked at him, her eyes were not those of a frightened survivor. They were those of a woman reborn in the fire of betrayal. "Peace is for the innocent, Marcus. I lost that the moment they left me to die." She walked toward the desk, where piles of newspapers lay scattered. Headlines of Sinclair Group's financial troubles, Hart Corporation's growing scandals, and photographs of Adrian and Lila smiling hollowly for the press. The perfect couple already fracturing under the weight of their lie. "They built their empires on my grave," she said, her voice calm. "Now I'll build mine on their ruins." Marcus studied her quietly. "And what will you call yourself?" She looked into the mirror, at the woman with shorter, darker hair, a new name already forming on her lips. "Eva Laurent," she said. "No past. No family. No weakness." He almost smiled. "You've thought this through." "I've lived it 100 times in my head," she said, picking up a single envelope from the desk. Inside was a new passport, new records, and a new face to show the world. The Harts lost their daughter. The Sinclairs gained a wife. Both will learn what it means to lose everything. A ghost in high heels. 2 years later, Eva Laurent stepped out of a sleek black car in front of the Laurent Holdings building, a glass fortress overlooking the city. Paparazzi turned their lenses toward her, curious about the mysterious young CEO who had risen seemingly from nowhere. She gave them nothing but a cool, unreadable smile. Inside, her name was spoken in whispers, the woman who bought companies like Candy, the genius with no past, the investor who never loses. In 5 years, Eva Laurent built a reputation of ice and steel, her success powered by a mind sharpened by heartbreak and revenge. Yet sometimes late at night when the world went still, she would catch her reflection in the window and see Evelyn Hart staring back, the girl in the wedding dress, waiting for someone who never came. The perfect strike. One winter morning, Marcus entered her office holding a file. His expression was grave but satisfied. "It's done," he said, placing it before her. "Sinclair Group has fallen below threshold. They're desperate. If we move now, we can buy them outright." Eva's gaze didn't waver. And Adrian? Still CEO on paper, but drowning. The board's ready to sell him out. She closed the file, her voice like the sound of closing doors. "Then let's make it official. Contact their lawyers. I want the announcement public." Marcus hesitated. "You're sure you're ready to see him again?" Eva looked past him to the skyline, the city gleaming beneath morning fog. Her fingers brushed the faint scar on her wrist, a remnant of that night. "I buried Evelyn Hart for this moment," she said softly. "It's time Mr. Sinclair met the ghost he created." And as the press release went live, Laurent Holdings acquires Sinclair Group, the world didn't know that history had just been rewritten. The boardroom of Sinclair Group smelled faintly of dust and desperation. The empire that had once been the pride of the city now felt hollow. Polished marble floors, aging portraits, and a silence that no amount of money could disguise. Adrian Sinclair sat at the head of the long table, his posture rigid, his tie loosened. The man who had once been photographed as a golden heir now looked like a man cornered by time. Numbers glowed on the screen in front of him. Losses, debts, and the cruel final line that marked the end of control. "Gentlemen," the chairman of the board began, "there's no avoiding it. The acquisition by Laurent Holdings is complete. As of today, they own a controlling share." Adrian's jaw tightened. He already knew. He had known from the moment the first call came through that morning, the voice of his secretary trembling as she said the new owner was arriving within the hour. The door opened, and silence fell. She walked in with the kind of poise that could stop time. A woman in a tailored black suit, heels sharp as her expression. Her hair, dark as midnight, framed a face both unfamiliar and hauntingly familiar. "Good morning," she said. "I'm Eva Laurent. As of today, Sinclair Group is a subsidiary of Laurent Holdings." Her voice was smooth, level, but every syllable carried authority. Adrian rose from his seat out of habit, old manners refusing to die. "Miss Laurent," he said carefully, extending a hand. "Welcome to Sinclair Group." She looked at his hand but did not take it. "Let's hope the welcome lasts," she replied, a faint curve of amusement touching her lips. Around the table, the board members exchanged uneasy glances. The woman radiated calm power, and yet something about her made the air heavier, tighter, as if the walls themselves remembered old sins. Eva's gaze moved across the room, evaluating, calculating. When her eyes met Adrian's, there was a flicker, something unspoken, but it vanished before it could take form. "You'll find the transition smooth," she continued. "I'm not here to dismantle Sinclair Group. I'm here to see if there's anything worth saving." A subtle insult wrapped in professionalism. The board shifted uncomfortably. Adrian said nothing. After the meeting, the room emptied until only two remained. Adrian and Eva stood opposite each other, sunlight pouring through the glass behind her, turning her outline into gold and shadow. "You don't waste time," he said at last, tone measured. "Most investors prefer to send lawyers first." "I prefer results," she replied. There was a pause, a beat too long to be businesslike. Adrian studied her quietly. "Forgive me, Miss Laurent. You look familiar. Have we met before?" Her expression didn't change. I doubt it, Mr. Sinclair. If we had, I think you'd remember. He smiled faintly, though it didn't reach his eyes. Perhaps I would. Eva closed her folder. You'll report directly to me from now on. I expect transparency, efficiency, and accountability. I have little patience for nostalgia. Nostalgia. For clinging to what's already dead. The words hit harder than she intended, and for a moment, something flickered in her gaze, an echo of pain buried deep. But she turned away before he could read it. Welcome to your new reality, Mr. Sinclair, she said, moving toward the door. I suggest you adapt quickly. As she left, Adrian's reflection followed her in the glass wall, a ghost staring after another ghost. He didn't know why her voice lingered in his mind, why a single phrase, clinging to what's already dead, felt like it had been spoken just for him. Outside, Eva stepped into the elevator, her composure unbroken until the doors closed. Only then did she exhale, a quiet release of air that trembled with everything she refused to feel. Through the mirrored surface, her reflection stared back. Not Evelyn Hart, not the bride who had once believed in forever, but Eva Laurent, the woman who came back to collect the debt of the past. The next morning, the city was painted in the pale blue of ambition and cold air. From the top floor of Laurent Holdings, the skyline looked small, like a kingdom waiting to be conquered. Eva Laurent stood before the glass, hands clasped behind her back, her reflection merging with the city lights. Marcus entered without knocking, holding a thin folder. His board voted last night, he said. They've agreed to the restructuring plan you suggested. Adrian Sinclair will remain as interim operations director, under you. Eva's lips curved slightly. Perfect. He'll see it as humiliation, Marcus warned. That's the point, she said calmly. A man who once thought he owned the world should learn how it feels to serve it. Marcus hesitated. And when he does? Then I'll decide what's left of him to keep. The offer. By noon, Adrian Sinclair was ushered into her office. He looked composed, but his shoulders carried the quiet exhaustion of someone who had spent the night arguing with ghosts. Eva gestured toward the chair opposite her desk. Mr. Sinclair, please sit. I assume this meeting isn't about congratulations, he said, taking the seat. Not exactly. She slid a single-page document toward him. It's an employment contract. Laurent Holdings will retain you as operations director of Sinclair Group. He frowned, scanning the paper. You're offering me my old position, with half the authority. With twice the oversight, she corrected. Think of it as an opportunity to rebuild your legacy. Or what's left of it. He looked up at her, eyes steady. You could have easily removed me. Why keep me at all? She smiled. Cool. Professional. You know Sinclair Group better than anyone. Besides, I don't discard things until I've tested their true value. Her words hung in the air, a delicate threat dressed as logic. Adrian signed the paper without hesitation. Then I'll prove my value, he said quietly. Eva tilted her head, studying him. You always were confident. He looked up at her, something sharp in his tone. Confidence isn't arrogance, Miss Laurent. It's survival. For the first time, her composure faltered, a flicker of the past brushing against the present. But she recovered instantly. We'll see which one it is for you. Private reflections. When he left, Marcus appeared at the doorway. You're playing with fire, he said softly. Eva didn't turn. Fire is the only thing that purifies. He's not the same man, Eva. You saw it yourself. Men like him don't change. They only adapt when they're losing. She touched the edge of the contract still lying on her desk, her nails tapping against the paper. Let him believe this is mercy. The harder he climbs, the longer the fall. And if you start to remember who he was to you? Eva's hand stilled. Her reflection in the window stared back, eyes unreadable. Then I'll remember who he became, she said. The first day. By the week's end, Adrian was back in the building that bore his name, but not his power. The same executives who once flattered him now looked past him. Every directive, every signature, every meeting passed through Eva Laurent. She watched him from a distance, unseen behind tinted glass. He worked without complaint, every movement deliberate, proud, determined. It should have satisfied her. It didn't. For every victory she claimed, an old ache stirred beneath the surface, one she refused to name. That night, when the offices were dark and the city lights burned like embers below, Eva whispered into the quiet. "This is your penance, Mr. Sinclair. And my revenge." But the words rang hollow even to her own ears. Lila Hart Sinclair had always loved mirrors. They told her she was beautiful, enviable, perfect, until lately, when they had started to whisper something else back. Fading. Her reflection in the penthouse mirror showed traces of sleepless nights beneath expertly drawn eyeliner. The tabloids had begun to lose interest in her charity luncheons and society appearances. The whispers now followed her wherever she went. Adrian's company collapsing, Sinclair name bought out by a stranger, the golden couple dimming fast. Lila threw the magazine across the room, the glossy pages crumpling against the marble floor. Her assistant hesitated at the doorway. "Mrs. Sinclair." "Don't call me that," she snapped. Then, smoothing her voice with practiced grace, she added, "I'm divorced. Remember." The assistant nodded, murmured an apology, and set a newspaper on the counter. Across the front page, Laurent Holdings appoints Eva Laurent as CEO of newly acquired Sinclair Group. The photo beneath the headline froze Lila where she stood. A woman in black, composed and striking, looked out from the frame with calm, unreadable eyes. Lila's fingers tightened around the paper. The resemblance was faint, but there. Something in the tilt of the chin, the way her gaze cut straight through the camera. No. Impossible. Evelyn was dead. Yet the longer Lila stared, the colder her blood ran. She whispered to herself, "It can't be her. It can't." But the thought dug its claws deep. A sister's obsession. By midnight, the penthouse lights still burned. Lila sat surrounded by clippings, old photos, and search results scattered across her desk. Every image of Eva Laurent she could find, every article, every profile. She compared them to old wedding photos of Evelyn. Same height. Similar eyes. The way she carried herself. Poised. Deliberate. Different hair. Different name. But everything else. Too close. Her phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. "You're not the only one wondering." Lila's breath caught. "Who is this?" she typed. No answer. For the first time in years, she felt the same fear she'd once inflicted on others. A quiet, suffocating dread that perhaps the past wasn't finished with her yet. She whispered to the dark, "If she's alive. If it really is her." And then, softer still. "What will she do to me?" Warnings and walls. Meanwhile, at Laurent Holdings, Marcus entered Eva's office to find her standing by the window again, watching the city stretch below like a living chessboard. "You heard," she said without turning. "About Lila? She's sniffing around already. I expected it sooner." Marcus crossed his arms. "She's unstable, Eva. If she starts talking, let her talk." Eva's tone was cool, detached. "The louder she screams, the more she sounds insane." "She's still your sister," Marcus said quietly. "And she's still dangerous. You're playing with lives again, including your own." That made her turn. "You think I don't know the cost? You think I haven't paid it?" Her voice cracked, not with weakness, but memory. Then, as quickly as it had come, the emotion vanished. "I'm not playing, Marcus," she said. "I'm finishing what they started." He looked at her for a long moment. "And when there's nothing left to finish?" Eva glanced at the faint scar on her wrist, the one she kept hidden beneath her watch. "Then I'll finally stop." But Marcus saw what she refused to admit. Her revenge had already become her life's pulse. Across the city. In a quiet corner of her penthouse, Lila poured herself a glass of wine, staring at the glowing skyline. Her phone screen showed Eva Laurent's face again. Magnified, dissected, compared. She traced a manicured nail along the outline of that cool, perfect smile. "If you are her," she whispered, her voice trembling between fear and fury, "then I'll find out. And I'll make sure you die for real this time." Adrian Sinclair moved through the new normal with the mechanical grace of a man who had rehearsed contrition until it fit. He arrived at the office before dawn, his silhouette cutting a lone figure against the glass towers. The building still bore his name. The ownership had changed, but habit lingered like dust. He walked the corridors as if following an old map, touching familiar banisters and pausing at framed photographs of triumphs that now felt like statues to a forgotten king. Work, he told himself, was the only place he could atone. Numbers did not ask forgiveness. They only demanded answers. He buried himself in ledgers, in logistics meetings, in salvaging deals that teetered on collapse. It was practical penance. It was quiet. It was, he believed, enough. But small things began to unravel the neatness he'd built. At a Monday briefing, a secretary cleared her throat and accidentally used the wrong honorific. "Ms. Hart, sorry. Miss Laurent, your files are on the table." The name landed like a pebble in a still pond, sending tiny ripples through his composure. He watched Eva as she sat, calm, composed, and the way she idly twisted a napkin with her fingertips. His mind snagged on that motion. Evelyn had done that. Habit, he told himself. Coincidence. Later that week, in the privacy of his office, Adrian found himself staring at an old photograph tucked behind a stack of contracts. Evelyn at a summer gala, laughing with an abandon he remembered and had spent years trying to forget. He traced the line of her jaw in the glossy paper and felt a hollow tighten in his chest. Guilt, he knew, could be a kind of haunting. But this felt different, as if the past were not only accusing him but also watching. He began to notice the little echoes, a phrase she used, a posture in a meeting, a half-smile that seemed devised to wound and to comfort at once. People who had worked with Evelyn whispered about Eva in the hallways with the same incredulous tone. "She's nothing like the girl we remember," and yet they admitted to a particular familiarity, as if something essential had traveled from one person to the other. Adrian's sleep was punctuated by fragmented memories. The altar, the assistant's hurried announcement, a hand in his that did not hold steady. In those dreams he always reached for Evelyn and found only rain and white lace slipping through his fingers. He woke with his palms damp, with a taste of iron on his tongue, and with the acute sensation that the world was rearranging itself around a truth he had not yet fully seen. He began to watch Eva. Not openly, never so clumsy, but in the way a surgeon observes a patient, searching for signs, for tremors, for history written in the angles of a face. He listened to her words and catalogued them. Efficiency, transparency, what's dead. Once, during a strategy session, she referenced a faulty delivery route from 3 years ago with a kind of specificity that made the room go quiet. She knew the minor failures of Sinclair Logistics with the intimacy of an insider. On a rainy evening, when the office emptied and the city lights blurred into wet smears, Adrian lingered behind in a darkened corner of the archives. He was looking for nothing in particular. Perhaps just shelter from the ache that followed him like a shadow. Instead he found a small detail that unstitched his restraint, a pendant trapped between the spines of old ledgers, its silver chain dulled by time. He picked it up with fingers that trembled despite himself. Evelyn's pendant, a tiny opal cradled in filigree, the one she'd worn the day they announced their engagement. He had seen it thousands of times. He had once promised it would remain at her throat forever. Adrian turned the pendant over and over in his hand. The memory came not as accusation but as a revelation. How often had he looked away? How many alarms had sounded and he had chosen silence? The pendant was not proof, not yet, but it was a corridor back to something he had locked and labeled guilt. He should have turned it over to security. He should have filed it. Instead, he slipped it into his jacket pocket and walked toward the elevator. He told himself a dozen reasons as to why. Perhaps it had been misplaced, perhaps lost by an employee, perhaps a relic from some acquisition. Rationalization was a coat he wore often these days. But as the elevator doors closed, he felt the air change, the copper tang of truth rising like steam. Across the city, in the sanctuary of Laurent Holdings, Eva received Marcus's message. He found something. Be careful. Her fingers paused above the screen. She had rehearsed this revenge for years in the fine print of her mind. She had not rehearsed the possibility of being recognized. Let him find what he must, she told Marcus later, folding the phone into her palm. He will come to a conclusion only when all the pieces fit. Her voice was steady, but under it, an undercurrent of apprehension threaded through like a thin wire. She had taught herself how to be unmovable. Still, a name, spoken in someone else's mouth, had the power to crack even the best-made armor. That night, Adrian sat alone on a bench across from the Sinclair fountain, the pendant heavy against his ribs. He watched the water thread silver in the lamplight and felt, for the first time since the wedding, a pulse of fear so sharp it was almost religion. What if he had been wrong? About the man he had been, about the choices he had made. What if there was no neat absolution, only the slow, grinding responsibility of having broken someone and then watched the world accept her death without asking questions? At home, Lila paced in front of her mirror, frantic and watchful. Her earlier obsession had metastasized into paranoia. The call she had intercepted the previous day, an anonymous tip that someone at Laurent Holdings had asked for old records, had done nothing but fan the flames. She knew the easiest way to stop a ghost was to make sure it could not speak. But ghosts were slippery. They lived in the cracks men left behind. Adrian, clutching the pendant, felt that crack yawning beneath him. He had always been a man who preferred to act. Now, for the first time, he felt the animal urge to be still and listen, to the city, to the rain, to the whisper that came from the pendant itself. Remember. The next morning, he arranged a meeting with Eva under the guise of operations review. When he stepped into her office, the air between them felt charged, as if a current passed unnoticed. She rose as he entered, and for one measured second the world contracted to the space between their faces. "Mr. Sinclair," she said, professional, controlled. "You requested this meeting." He placed the pendant on her desk without a preface, its opal catching the light like a small captive moon. Eva's eyes flicked to it, briefly, almost indiscernibly, but color did not betray her. "This was found in our archives," he said, voice flat. "Do you know whose it is?" Her fingers hovered above the opal, then withdrew. "No," she answered. "It could belong to anyone." Adrian watched her, noting the perfect calm that barely masked something else. "If it belonged to someone who," his throat tightened, he swallowed, "was said to be dead, would you still say the same?" Eva's gaze steadied on him, an unreadable shard of steel. "Death changes what people say," she replied. "But it doesn't change facts. If you have reason to suspect an error in our records, present it formally. I will ensure everything is investigated." Adrian wanted to press, to ask if she remembered him in summer light and wedding vows, to demand an answer that would make either confession or absolution possible. Instead he nodded and left, the pendant a small, heavy thing in his pocket, an anchor pulling him toward a truth he had been avoiding since the altar. As he closed his office door, a single thought followed him. Ghosts did not always need graves to be real. Sometimes they walked the floors of the living, wearing new names like second skins, waiting for the moment someone else would notice the way they breathed. The city had the dull shine of late autumn rain, and the boardroom air felt taut as wire. Eva stood at the head of the long glass table, her hands steady though the storm inside her wasn't. Across the screens, a headline glowed in ruthless font. Laurent Holdings faces insider scandal. Leaked files traced to CEO's office. Her jaw tightened. The files were real, doctored just enough to raise suspicion, planted precisely to make her fall. Marcus entered, eyes grim. "Someone leaked old Sinclair correspondence to the press. They're framing you for manipulating acquisitions data." Eva's expression didn't waver. "Who?" He hesitated. "It came through one of Lila's old PR contacts." Anonymous drop. "Of course. Lila." Eva exhaled slowly, her mind already running through layers of damage control. "Call the legal team. I'll handle the board." But even as she spoke, a knot formed deep in her chest. Not fear, not anger. Recognition. Her sister was panicking, clawing at the edges of her own illusion. And the worst part, Eva had expected it. Almost wanted it. The boardroom. By noon, the executives gathered like vultures disguised in silk and steel. Their voices hummed with false civility, every question dipped in polite accusation. "Miss Laurent, can you explain how these files left your server? Were you aware Sinclair contracts were falsified during acquisition?" Eva answered each with clinical calm, her tone precise, her gaze sharp. But her pulse betrayed her, beating a little too fast beneath the silk of her blouse. Then, just as one director moved to propose a suspension pending investigation, the door opened. Adrian Sinclair walked in. The room fell silent. He carried a file in one hand, and a look in his eyes that was neither submission nor defiance, but something steadier. "With permission," he said, placing the folder on the table, "I believe this will clarify the matter." Inside were server logs, timestamps, and digital traces. All led not to Eva Laurent, but to a private account linked to Lila Sinclair's media firm. "Mrs. Sinclair's company fabricated and leaked the data," Adrian continued. "This report confirms that Miss Laurent's system was never breached internally." A ripple of tension passed through the room. The directors whispered among themselves. Eva stood motionless, her control tested in a way no board meeting had ever done. Adrian's defense was sharp, unassailable, and entirely unnecessary. He'd just saved her career. Aftermath. When the meeting adjourned, Eva found him waiting outside the elevator. "You didn't have to do that," she said quietly. He gave a faint smile. "Maybe not. But I couldn't watch another innocent person be ruined." Her laugh was soft, brittle. "You have a strange sense of justice, Mr. Sinclair. Selective memory, perhaps." He didn't flinch. "Maybe. But I remember enough." The elevator doors slid open. For a long second, neither of them moved. Rain streaked the windows behind them like blurred tears on glass. Adrian's voice dropped, low and raw. "When I left you that day." She cut him off sharply. "Don't. I thought I was saving someone. I didn't know it was the wrong person." The words hung between them like a confession no one had asked for. Eva turned her head slightly, just enough to hide the tremor in her throat. "You should be careful, Mr. Sinclair. Regret doesn't erase the past. It only stains the present." "Maybe," he said softly. "But it's still a start." The elevator doors closed, sealing the silence between them. Nightfall. Later that night, Eva stood alone in her penthouse, the city a haze of blue and gold beneath her. The scandal had dissolved by morning, thanks to Adrian's evidence and Marcus's swift press strategy. Her reputation was intact. Her revenge, however, was not. She poured herself a glass of wine, her reflection shimmering in the window. It should have been victory, but it tasted like surrender. In her mind, she saw the look on Adrian's face when he defended her. Not pride. Not ego. Just quiet sincerity. The kind of man she'd once believed him to be. For the first time in years, she felt her resolve bend, faint but undeniable. Marcus's words echoed back from days before. "You're playing with lives again, including your own." She had thought he meant risk. Now she understood he had meant emotion. When the doorbell rang, she didn't expect company. Through the intercom, a familiar voice said quietly, "We need to talk." "Adrian." Eva's hand hovered over the door controls, her heartbeat threading between defiance and something dangerously close to hope. After a long pause, she pressed the button and said, softly, "Come in." The night pressed against the city like a held breath. Rain traced soft fingers across the penthouse windows, and inside, Eva Laurent stood by the fireplace, a portrait of control, until the elevator chimed. Adrian stepped inside without waiting to be invited further. His coat was still wet, his expression carved from tension and disbelief. In his hand, something gleamed faintly under the light, a silver pendant. Eva froze. He set it on the table between them with deliberate care, the sound sharp as a blade. "I went back to the archives," he said. "To the night we met in this office. You said you didn't recognize it." His gaze lifted, eyes searching hers. "Tell me why you're wearing my dead fiancé's necklace." The mask cracks. Eva's breath caught, just for a heartbeat, but in that instant, her carefully built walls trembled. She could have denied it. She could have laughed, called it coincidence, walked away untouched. But something in his voice, the quiet fracture, the ache of someone who had lived too long with guilt, reached into the part of her she thought she had buried in that wreckage years ago. "Take it off," he said softly, stepping closer. "Say her name. Just once." She met his eyes, calm but breaking. "What would that change, Adrian?" He flinched at the sound of his name. How easily it fell from her lips. How familiar it sounded after all these years. "Everything," he said. "Because I buried Evelyn Hart in my mind to survive. And now she's standing in front of me pretending she doesn't know me." Her voice came out barely above a whisper. "You should have buried me properly then." The truth burns. Silence settled between them. Heavy. Suffocating. Then, Eva exhaled, shoulders trembling once before she forced herself still. "I didn't die that night," she said quietly. "Someone pulled me from the wreck before the flames reached me. I woke up nameless, faceless to the world. The doctors said I was lucky. I thought it was punishment." Adrian's hands clenched. "You let everyone think you were dead. You made it easy," she shot back. "You married my sister before my blood was dry on the pavement." He shook his head, voice hoarse. "You don't understand." "I understand perfectly." The words cracked like thunder. "You traded me for convenience. You left me to rot in whispers and sympathy while you built your empire with her. Her fury surged, but beneath it, a tremor of hurt that betrayed the years she'd spent keeping it contained. Adrian stepped closer, his own restraint fracturing. You think I didn't suffer? You think I didn't look for you? Lila told me you were gone. She showed me the report, the photo, the body. His voice broke. I believed it because I wanted to. Because losing you completely was easier than facing what I'd done. The admission landed like a confession too late to save anyone. Eva looked at him, eyes bright with unshed tears that refused to fall. You could have fought for me. And you could have come back, he countered. Her voice dropped, soft, lethal. I did. Just not for love. Fire and ash. The rain outside grew heavier, smearing the city into streaks of gray light. Between them, the pendant gleamed, fragile, accusing. Adrian's gaze lingered on her, as though memorizing what time had changed and what it had spared. So this is what you've become, he said quietly. A ghost that builds empires out of vengeance. Eva's lips curved, a pale imitation of a smile. And you, a man who mistakes remorse for redemption. They stood facing each other, the past stretched taut between them, unbroken, unhealed. Finally, Adrian picked up the pendant and held it out. If you're Evelyn, then take it back. She looked at it, at the life it symbolized, love, betrayal, loss, and slowly closed his fingers around it instead. No, she whispered. You keep it. You earned it more than I did. Aftermath. When the door closed behind him, Eva's legs gave way. She sat in the silence, her reflection flickering in the rain-streaked glass. Not Evelyn, not Eva, but something in between. Outside, Adrian stood in the corridor, the pendant cold against his palm. He didn't look back. They had both survived the same tragedy, but neither of them had truly come back from it. The morning after the confrontation dawned colorless. Fog hung low over the city, swallowing the skyline in a shroud of pale gray, as if the world itself had exhaled and forgotten to breathe back in. Eva sat in her office, surrounded by order, papers aligned, pens straight, blinds half drawn. The surface of her desk gleamed, unblemished, except for one thing. A single empty space where the pendant had been. She didn't need to touch her throat to know it was missing. Its absence pulsed louder than any heartbeat. The truth had been spoken. And truth, once freed, never went back quietly. A kingdom of glass. The morning's meetings passed like ghosts, words spoken, signatures made, faces blurred. Eva moved through them on instinct, her poise unbroken, her voice steady. No one would suspect the fractures beneath the surface. But every reflection, the boardroom's glass walls, the polished elevator doors, even the silver of her coffee spoon, betrayed her. Each one offered her a glimpse of a woman she didn't quite recognize. Not Evelyn. Not Eva. Something else. Something unfinished. Marcus entered late in the afternoon. Expression careful. He'd seen the signs before, the stillness that came after emotional storms. She knows, he said quietly. Eva didn't ask who. Lila always did. She's panicking, he continued. She's called in favors, started talking to reporters. She won't stop until she tears both of you down. Eva's lips curved into something almost like a smile, though it never reached her eyes. Then she'll get her wish. Marcus frowned. You're not making sense. I spent years building this empire to destroy one man, she said, looking out over the skyline. Now I've done that, and I can't even tell if I've won. The man in the mirror. Across the city, Adrian sat in his apartment, the pendant resting in his palm like a small verdict. He hadn't slept. The memories refused to let him. He saw her face, not as Eva, not as the woman who had humiliated him in boardrooms, but as Evelyn standing in the rain, eyes blazing with grief and defiance. He had asked for the truth and she had given it, stripped bare and bitter. And somehow, that honesty had hurt more than any lie. Adrian poured himself a drink, then didn't touch it. He didn't need to numb it anymore. The pain was proof he was still capable of feeling something real. He opened his laptop, scrolling through Laurent Holdings' press files. Every photo of her was a study in control. Posture perfect, expression poised, eyes distant. But now he could see what others couldn't, the fracture line hidden behind the calm. She never really came back, he murmured. She just learned how to haunt me better. Unraveling. That night, Eva returned home to find the storm breaking again over the city. Lightning painted the glass walls in silver streaks. The wind howled through the high-rise like something wild and grieving. She walked barefoot through the quiet, the sound of rain echoing off marble floors. Her reflection followed her, not obediently, but as if it questioned her right to exist. At her dresser, she opened a drawer and found the engagement ring Adrian had given her. A simple band of gold, forgotten in a box she should have thrown away years ago. She turned it over between her fingers. The metal was cold, like memory. For a moment, she imagined slipping it on, just to feel what it was like. Not forgiveness, but closure. Instead, she set it down beside the empty velvet space where her pendant had once been. Then she whispered, to no one and everyone, "I was supposed to win." The last line. In another part of the city, Adrian stood at his window, holding the pendant one last time. He stared at the small beautiful thing that had once symbolized a promise, and now a wound. He placed it inside an envelope addressed to Eva Laurent. No note. No explanation. Just a quiet surrender. When the courier arrived the next morning, Eva took the package in silence. She opened it and found the pendant lying inside. Returned, cleansed of all meaning except one. "I know who you are." She closed the box, placed it in her drawer, and finally, for the first time in years, allowed herself to cry. Not for what she'd lost, but for what she'd become. The morning headlines screamed louder than the storm that had rolled through the night before. Eva Laurent, the bride who came back from the dead? A grainy photo accompanied the story, a side-by-side comparison of two faces. Evelyn Hart in her bridal gown, smiling with naive radiance. Eva Laurent at a corporate gala, poised and powerful. The resemblance was unmistakable. Too perfect to ignore. The article was signed anonymously, but Eva knew that style. Every carefully chosen word, every insinuation, it was Lila's work. The House of Lies. In her penthouse office, Eva read the article twice. Once as Evelyn, feeling the sharp stab of exposure. Then again as Eva Laurent, calculating what came next. Marcus burst through the door without knocking. "You need to make a statement before this spreads further. The investors are panicking. The board wants answers." Eva set the tablet down, her expression unreadable. "They want blood, you mean?" Marcus hesitated. "She's gone too far this time." "She's afraid," Eva said softly. "She knows what comes next." He leaned against the desk, lowering his voice. "And what is that?" Eva looked up, her eyes cold as glass. "Retribution. Lila's fall." Across the city, Lila Hart Sinclair sat in a dim hotel suite, champagne glass in hand, watching her masterpiece unfold on television. Her phone buzzed with notifications, reporters, sponsors, gossip sites, all hungry for the next revelation. She smiled, lips painted a perfect crimson. "Welcome back from the dead, dear sister," she murmured. "Let's see if the world still loves you after this." But her satisfaction didn't last. Within hours, counter-statements began appearing. Swift, professional, devastating. Laurent Holdings denied every claim, citing malicious fabrication and identity fraud. The journalist who had broken the story was fired. Lila's PR firm received a cease and desist order signed by Eva herself. Then came the final blow. Leaked financial records from Lila's own company. Evidence of embezzlement and tax fraud. Her phone buzzed again. A message from an unknown number. "You wanted the world to remember my name. Now they'll never forget yours." Lila's champagne slipped from her fingers, shattering on the floor. Face to face. That evening, she stormed into Laurent Holdings, security protests trailing uselessly behind her. The elevator carried her up in silence, her reflection distorted in the metal doors. Not the perfect sister anymore, but a cornered one. Eva was waiting in her office, calm as a blade. "You look tired," Eva said quietly. Lila's laugh was brittle. "You ruined me. You did that yourself." Lila took a step forward, fury trembling in her voice. "You think this is justice? You stole my husband, my life." "I didn't steal anything," Eva cut in. "You took what wasn't yours and called it love. You left me to die for it." For a heartbeat, the world went still. The two sisters faced each other. Mirror images of ambition and regret. "I loved him," Lila whispered. Eva's voice was calm, but her eyes were fire. No. You loved winning. The breaking point. Lila's composure finally shattered. What do you want from me? Eva stepped closer, her voice low and measured. I want you to know what it feels like to lose everything you ever built on someone else's pain. Tears welled in Lila's eyes, but she didn't look away. You've already won, Evelyn. Isn't that enough? Eva paused. That name still had power, still carried the ghost of a woman who once believed in happy endings. But she shook her head slowly. Winning doesn't bring the dead back. Lila's voice broke. Then what now? You destroy me, and what do you become? Eva's silence was answer enough. Ashes. By dawn, Eva Hart Sinclair's arrest dominated every major news outlet. Fraud. Blackmail. Conspiracy. Eva watched the coverage from her window, the city bathed in cold morning light. Justice, she told herself. Balance restored. But it didn't feel like victory. It felt like grief. Final, irreversible. Marcus entered quietly. She'll be arraigned tomorrow. You did what you set out to do. Eva didn't turn. No. Evelyn Hart did. Eva Laurent just cleaned up her mess. He hesitated. And Adrian? Her eyes flickered. Unreadable. He'll have to decide whether to love the ghost or the woman who killed her. The city had gone strangely quiet after the storm. The scandal had burned through every headline, then faded, leaving only silence and the faint taste of ashes. For the first time in years, Evelyn Hart, or the woman who used to be her, had no one left to fight. Her enemies were gone. Her revenge complete. And yet, the emptiness she'd always feared finally arrived. Vast, echoing, unbearable. A visit. The elevator opened onto the quiet lobby of the Sinclair Foundation. Eva stepped inside, not as a rival, not as a conqueror, but as someone visiting the ruins of a past life. Adrian was there, waiting. He looked different. No longer the sharp-edged CEO she'd known, but something softer, quieter. Time had stripped him down to the truth of himself. He didn't rise when she entered. He simply looked at her for a long time, as if afraid she might vanish if he blinked. You came, he said finally. I wasn't sure I would. His smile was faint. You always decide at the last moment. Some things never change. She sat across from him, the space between them wide as an ocean. Words left unsaid. For a while, neither spoke. The quiet hummed between them, not awkward, but heavy with the weight of what had been lived and lost. Adrian finally broke it. I read the reports, he said. About Lila. About everything. Eva nodded once. It's over now. He studied her face. Is it? Her gaze dropped to her hands. It has to be. Adrian leaned back, eyes searching hers. I spent years trying to forget Evelyn Hart. To make peace with what happened. But when you came back. He paused, as if the words cost him something. I realized I never really stopped loving her. Even when she hated me. Eva looked up, her expression unreadable. You loved who I was. Not who I am. Maybe, he said quietly. But maybe that's enough. Maybe love doesn't die. It just changes shape. Her voice trembled, barely perceptible. And what shape does yours take now? He smiled, sad, sincere. Forgiveness. What's left? The word hung between them, fragile as glass. Eva wanted to speak, to explain, to tell him that forgiveness was something she hadn't earned. Not from him, not from herself. But all she could manage was a small, tired smile. You're better at endings than I am, she whispered. He shook his head. This doesn't have to be an ending. But she rose anyway, smoothing her coat, reclaiming her composure like a familiar shield. It does. Because if I stay, I'll start believing I deserve peace. And I'm not there yet. She turned to go, then stopped at the door. I used to think coming back would fix everything, she said softly. That revenge would make me whole again. But all it did was prove how broken I still am. Adrian's voice was gentle. Maybe that's what it means to come back from the dead, to learn how to live again, even if it hurts. She didn't look back. Maybe. Aftermath. Outside, the city stretched beneath her. Endless, indifferent, alive. Eva walked through the crowd unnoticed, her reflection blending into the glass and rain, a ghost learning to breathe again. Somewhere behind her, Adrian watched from his office window, the pendant lying on his desk, a relic of what once was, no longer a wound but a memory. And for the first time, neither of them felt haunted. Just human. Spring returned to the city slowly. The air was warmer now, the streets softer with rain, and the first pale blossoms lined the boulevard leading to the Laurent building, a place that had once been a monument to vengeance. Inside, Eva's office was almost empty. The shelves were bare. The nameplate was gone. Only the faint scent of lilies remained. Evelyn's favorite. Marcus stood in the doorway, watching her seal a plain white envelope. "You're really leaving," he said. Eva smiled faintly. "You make it sound like I've never done that before. This time feels different." "It is," she admitted. "I'm not running. I'm just done." He hesitated. "And Adrian?" She glanced toward the window, where sunlight caught the edges of the skyline. "He deserves to remember me kindly. That's the best I can give him." The letter. That afternoon, the envelope arrived at Adrian Sinclair's desk. No return address, only his name written in Eva's meticulous handwriting. He hesitated before opening it. Inside was a single page, the paper heavy, the ink steady and dark. "Adrian, I once thought revenge was the only way to live after love. Now I know it's only another kind of death. You ask me who I am. I'm someone who loved you once, deeply, and someone who had to destroy that love to find herself again. I don't ask for forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I hope one day when the hurt fades, you'll remember me not as the ghost who came back, but as the woman who finally learned how to leave. Evelyn." At the bottom, she had drawn a small circle. The same symbol she used to sign the first letter she'd ever sent him years ago, before everything had fallen apart. Adrian read it twice. Then he folded it carefully, placed it in his drawer beside the pendant, and closed it. No tears. No anger. Just the quiet ache of understanding. The new beginning. 3 months later, on the coast of Amalfi, a woman in a simple linen dress sat in a small cafe overlooking the sea. Her hair was shorter now, her face unpainted, her eyes softer. The waiter approached. "Signora Laurent?" She smiled politely. "Not anymore. Just Eva." He handed her a letter. Forwarded from London. She opened it. A single line in Adrian's handwriting. "Maybe this isn't the end after all. Eh?" Eva stared at it for a long time, a quiet laugh escaping her. Not joy. Not sadness. Something gentler. Something alive. She folded the note and slipped it into her journal. Then she looked out at the horizon, where the sun met the sea, and whispered. Not to the past, not to the ghosts, but to herself. Finally. Epilogue. In the city she once ruled, the story of Evelyn Hart and Eva Laurent became legend. A tale of betrayal, rebirth, and a love too human to ever be perfect. But somewhere far from the noise and the headlines, a woman walked along the shore. No longer haunted, no longer vengeful. Just free. And that, in the end, was all the resurrection she ever needed. The Amalfi air shimmered gold that evening, the horizon blurring into watercolor shades of rose and silver. Tourists laughed in the streets below, their voices mingling with the hum of the sea. But Eva sat alone on a quiet terrace, sketchbook open, pencil tracing lazy lines she didn't intend to finish. Her life had settled into something simple. She taught design classes twice a week at a small art institute. She read. She walked. She breathed. It wasn't the life Evelyn Hart had dreamed of, or the empire Eva Laurent had built. It was something smaller, and somehow more real. The visitor. The waiter appeared beside her, smiling. Signora, you have a guest. Eva frowned. I wasn't expecting anyone. A man stood at the entrance. Tall, quiet, dressed in a linen shirt rolled to the elbows. The sea wind caught his hair, turning it into something softer than memory. For a heartbeat, she couldn't move. Then Adrian smiled. Am I interrupting your piece? Eva rose slowly, her voice caught somewhere between disbelief and laughter. You found me. He shrugged lightly. I followed a letter. The conversation. They sat together, the ocean murmuring below them. The silence was easier this time. No ghosts, no anger, just two people who had once loved each other in all the wrong ways and somehow survived it. Adrian looked at her hands. You're painting again. Trying to, she said, smiling faintly. It's strange. Creating something that isn't meant to hurt anyone. You always could, he said softly. You just forgot how. She looked out at the sea. Maybe I had to destroy everything first to see what was left. He nodded. And what's left? She turned to him, eyes warm with quiet honesty. Me. Forgiveness. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Adrian reached into his pocket and placed the pendant, her pendant, on the table between them. I've kept it long enough, he said. Eva looked at it, the metal glinting softly in the sunlight, and smiled. You should keep it. It suits you better now. He chuckled, shaking his head. Maybe. But I think it belongs wherever peace does. She took it gently and slipped it into her sketchbook. This time, it didn't feel like a weight. It felt like a memory laid to rest. The parting. When the sun dipped low and the sky turned to fire, Adrian stood. I have to go back tomorrow. The foundation's expanding into Europe. Eva smiled. Of course it is. He hesitated. If I came back someday. She stopped him with a look. Kind, certain. Then you'll know where to find me. He nodded once, as if that was enough. And for them it was the sea. After he left, Eva walked down to the shore. The waves lapped at her feet, cool and forgiving. She tilted her face toward the wind, eyes closed. For the first time, she didn't feel haunted by the past. She felt alive in it, the good, the bad, the love, the loss, all woven together into something she could finally call her own. A single line drifted through her mind, soft as the tide. Maybe coming back from the dead isn't about revenge. It's about remembering how to live. And with that thought, she smiled. Small, quiet, but real. And kept walking. Until the sea met the sky. Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more original novel stories. And stay tuned, our next story is coming soon.